He bled for the alien princess, and the queen keeps him close. The shuttle hummed quietly as it descended toward the gleaming spires of Lumeria, a distant planet known for its rare crystal forests and sky-high towers that shimmered like mirrors. For years, humans had only heard of Lumeria in whispers. Its people were intelligent, peaceful, and far advanced, and they rarely allowed outsiders to visit. Yet here he was, stepping onto a planet that seemed like a living painting, a place so beautiful it made even the most advanced human technologies seem dull in comparison. Elias was not a diplomat by training. He was a xenobiologist, a specialist in understanding alien biology and life systems, and he had spent most of his life in labs studying creatures that could barely be described as living in human terms. But the Earth Council had insisted that his knowledge might be valuable in building trust with Lumeria, and Elias, ever curious, had agreed, more out of fascination than duty. The palace, when he arrived, was even more extraordinary than the shuttle windows had promised. The spires reached so high that they seemed to pierce the thin clouds, and their surfaces reflected the sky in 1,000 shades. Walkways made of transparent crystal stretched between towers, and delicate bridges swayed gently as they carried travelers above the forests below. When Elias first stepped onto one of these bridges, he could see alien plants that glowed softly in shades of violet and green, their leaves whispering as if the wind itself were singing to him. He was greeted by attendants who moved with precise grace, their skin shimmering faintly in patterns that changed with their emotions, a living map of feeling. Elias tried to remember the proper etiquette, but every small gesture felt strange in this world, where even breathing seemed different. He was led through corridors that shifted subtly with light and sound, until he reached a grand hall, larger than any building he had ever seen. At the far end of the hall stood the royal family, waiting to receive him. Princess Lyra was the first to notice him. She was small by human standards, yet carried a presence that was impossible to ignore. Her skin was smooth and luminous, and her eyes, deep violet with flecks of gold, seemed to look straight into the core of anyone who dared meet her gaze. Elias found himself instinctively bowing, even though he knew this gesture might not even exist in their culture. "Welcome, human," she said softly, her voice musical yet precise. He blinked, unsure if she had spoken in English or if his own translator implants had done the work. The words felt alive in his ears, almost like a melody. "Princess Lyra," he stammered, "it's an honor to be here." She inclined her head slightly, as if acknowledging his nervousness rather than mocking it. The queen, Regent Solara, observed from a few steps behind her daughter, her expression serene and unreadable. Her eyes, a deep silver that seemed to absorb light, studied Elias with the kind of attention that made him aware of every breath he took. The welcoming ceremony began with rituals that Elias had only seen described in research journals. Crystals floated around the hall, orbiting in slow, intricate dances. The air itself seemed to hum, vibrating gently in resonance with unseen frequencies. Then, as the attendants offered gifts of exotic flowers and light-emitting fruits, something unexpected happened. Princess Lyra gasped sharply, clutching her chest. Her delicate body trembled and her breathing grew uneven. The crystal flowers in the air dimmed, and the hum of the hall faltered as if sensing her distress. Panic surged through Elias before he could stop it. His first instinct was to step forward, but human custom dictated hesitation in the presence of royalty. The alien attendants froze, unsure whether to act or wait for royal command. Ignoring all protocol, Elias moved closer. He knelt beside the princess, instinctively examining her vital signs as best he could with human knowledge. Her skin, though luminous, had paled slightly, and her pulse was erratic. No one else dared touch her, and for a moment he felt a wave of responsibility heavier than anything he had ever carried in his life. "Stand back," he said softly, not to order them but to give himself space. I need room to help her. The queen's silver eyes narrowed slightly, but she did not intervene. It was a moment of tension unlike anything Elias had experienced. He pressed his hands lightly against the princess's wrist, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. Her biosignals were different from anything human. He could feel the energy moving under her skin, flowing in patterns that almost resembled light. His mind raced, trying to recall every theory he had learned about alien physiology, and in that instant he realized that human intuition might be the only tool available. He spoke softly, encouragingly, as he applied gentle pressure and used his knowledge of medicine. Slowly, he began improvising, combining techniques from human first aid with his understanding of alien biochemistry. He administered a small dose of synthesized enzymes from his kit, ones designed for adaptive application across species. Every second felt like hours, yet Elias moved carefully, aware that one wrong step could worsen the situation. The princess's breath began to stabilize. Her trembling lessened, and her wide violet eyes blinked as if she had just returned from another world. The floating crystals around the hall brightened again, and the attendants exhaled in relief. The hum of the palace resumed, steady and soothing. Finally, Elias stepped back, exhausted but relieved. A faint luminescent streak remained on his hand where her energy had touched him directly, a mark that glowed subtly, a sign that his actions had left an imprint. He didn't know whether this was temporary or permanent, but he felt its strange warmth coursing through his skin. Princess Lyra looked at him, her expression a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered. "No one has ever touched me this way before." Elias shook his head. "I just did what I could," he said, his voice shaking slightly from adrenaline. "It's what humans do. We try to help." The queen stepped forward at last. Her gaze lingered on Elias, and for the first time he felt the full weight of her attention. "You are unlike any human I have ever known," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried authority that made the entire hall quiet. "It seems your compassion and intuition are valuable. You will remain with us, not merely as a guest, but as someone our family must watch closely." Elias felt a mix of pride and fear. He had never expected recognition, let alone such an honor, yet he could not ignore the unspoken warning. To remain here was to accept responsibilities far beyond anything he had imagined. For the next several hours, he was escorted through the palace, guided by attendants who explained not only the layout of the grand structures, but the intricate social rules that governed the royal family. Elias listened carefully, trying to absorb everything while keeping an eye on the princess. She walked beside him slowly, her strength returning with each step. By evening, the palace had begun to settle into its usual rhythm. Lights glowed softly in the corridors, and the air was filled with a quiet music that seemed almost alive. The queen invited Elias to a private chamber for dinner, a rare honor for a visitor. The room was circular, with windows that revealed the glowing forests below. "You have a mark," the queen said, gesturing to his hand. "It is faint, yet I can sense its presence. This is unusual for a human. You have connected with her in a way that defies our understanding." Elias flexed his fingers, looking at the glow that pulsed softly. "I don't know why it happened. I only reacted. I couldn't just stand by." Regent Solara nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is the difference between humans and us. We plan, we calculate, we follow protocol. You act, and in your acting, you create bonds that even our most advanced technology cannot replicate." Elias felt a warmth in his chest that had little to do with pride. It was something deeper, an acknowledgement that, in this moment, humans mattered in the vast expanse of the galaxy. He realized that his actions were more than a medical intervention. They were a bridge, a reminder that even in a universe of advanced civilizations, the simplest qualities, compassion, courage, and quick thinking, could leave a mark that no protocol, no law, and no alien custom could erase. As the evening passed, he and Princess Lyra spoke quietly about their worlds. She asked questions about Earth, its oceans and forests, the mountains and skies he had known. Elias told her stories of human history, of exploration and discovery, of art and music. She listened intently, her violet eyes wide with wonder, occasionally reaching out to touch his hand, feeling the subtle glow still present. By the end of the night, Elias understood something profound. His presence here was not by chance. The universe had placed him in this court, not merely to observe, but to become part of something larger than himself. The mark on his hand was more than a sign of the princess's survival. It was a symbol of trust, of connection, and perhaps of destiny. As he finally retired to his quarters, he looked out over the crystal forests. The wind carried a scent he could not name, a mixture of flowers and something entirely alien. Yet it was comforting, grounding him in this new reality. Tomorrow he would wake to a palace filled with wonder and responsibility, to a princess who had trusted him with her life, and to a queen who had chosen to keep him close. Elias Trent, human xenobiologist, had come to Lumeria expecting observation. He would stay to understand, to learn, and perhaps to change the course of a civilization in ways no one, least of all himself, could have predicted. And somewhere, deep within him, he felt that the universe was watching, waiting to see what a human could do when faced with worlds beyond imagination. Dr. Elias Trent awoke to the soft hum of the palace. The light filtering through the crystal windows painted the walls in shades of violet and gold. Even in sleep, the palace seemed alive, as if it breathed along with its inhabitants. He stretched and rubbed his hand, still faintly glowing where Princess Lyra's energy had touched him. The mark was subtle now, but it reminded him of the responsibility he had assumed the previous day. Breakfast was a quiet affair in the palace's inner dining hall. Elias had been instructed to sit with attendants who explained the proper etiquette, which he followed as best he could. Meals were served on floating plates, carrying food that shimmered like liquid jewels. He was offered a taste of something called lumora, a sweet substance that glowed faintly and seemed to adjust its flavor according to the eater's mood. He marveled at it, careful not to make a face that could be interpreted as disrespectful. Princess Lyra arrived shortly after, moving with a grace that made him feel clumsy in comparison. She greeted him with a slight bow, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement that carried warmth. "Good morning, Dr. Trent," she said. Her voice still held a musical quality, but now it was softer, more relaxed. "Good morning, Princess," Elias replied, smiling. "How are you feeling today?" Lyra touched her chest lightly. "Better, much better, thanks to you." She paused, studying his glowing hand. "The mark, it hasn't disappeared yet." Elias looked at it and shrugged. "I think it's a kind of connection, something your body left behind when I helped you." She nodded thoughtfully. "Humans are strange, but perhaps that strangeness is good." The queen observed from a distance, her silver eyes still fixed on Elias. He could sense her measuring him, weighing not only his abilities but his character. There was no fear in her gaze, only a quiet acknowledgement that he might be more important than anyone realized. After breakfast, he was escorted to a chamber filled with holographic displays, each one depicting complex biological systems and environmental patterns from Lumeria. The queen had arranged for him to work alongside the palace's scientists and healers, introducing him to their knowledge while learning from him in return. "Your human perspective may reveal patterns we have not yet seen," the queen said. "We value innovation, but also subtlety. Observe carefully and act when necessary." Elias nodded. He understood her meaning. This was not a laboratory or a classroom. It was a court where every observation could have consequences and where his actions would be noticed and remembered. The first task was simple in theory but complicated in execution. The palace's water systems, designed to draw moisture from the air and distribute it across the floating gardens, were showing irregularities. Some areas were thriving, while others were drying out despite the same conditions. The alien engineers had tried several approaches, but none had fully worked. Elias studied the diagrams, noting the flow patterns, the crystalline conduits, and the energy fields. Slowly, he began to see something they had overlooked: a subtle resonance in the conduits that affected water absorption, differently depending on proximity to certain crystals. He suggested slight adjustments to the frequency of the energy fields, aligning them with natural vibrations in the palace's architecture. The engineers followed his instructions, skeptical at first, but cautiously hopeful. Within hours, the system responded beautifully, and water flowed evenly through every garden. The plants perked up, the air became fresher, and a faint hum of approval seemed to pass through the palace. Princess Lyra appeared at the entrance to the chamber, her violet eyes wide with admiration. "You understand things that even our engineers could not." Elias smiled. "I just tried to see it differently. Sometimes looking at a problem from another point of view helps." Lyra nodded, clearly impressed. "Humans think in strange ways. Perhaps that is why you were able to save me yesterday." The Queen's presence was suddenly felt behind them. She did not speak immediately, but the silence carried weight. Finally, she said, "Doctor Trent, your work is appreciated, not only for its success but for the manner in which you approached it. Observation without arrogance, action without force. These are qualities we rarely see, even among our own." Elias felt a surge of warmth, not from pride but from a quiet understanding. He was being recognized not just for skill, but for character. The idea that humans could make a meaningful contribution to a civilization far older and more advanced than Earth was both humbling and empowering. The next few days passed in a rhythm that Elias quickly adapted to. He assisted the healers in understanding alien physiology, shared human techniques for problem solving, and began learning the subtle ways the palace operated. He discovered that the court communicated in layers. Words were spoken, but thoughts and emotions were often conveyed through subtle shifts in skin patterns and body posture. Humans had no natural way to do this, but he learned to observe, interpret, and respond, gradually becoming more effective in his interactions. Princess Lyra grew closer during this period. She was curious, intelligent, and surprisingly humorous, often teasing him gently when he misinterpreted a gesture or used a phrase incorrectly. Elias found her company comforting. There was no fear, no expectation of romance, only mutual respect and curiosity. They spent hours discussing science, history, and philosophy, comparing human and Lemurian cultures. She asked him about Earth's oceans, mountains, and forests, and he marveled at how she could visualize them even without ever having left her planet. One afternoon, while they walked through a corridor that overlooked the glowing forests, Lyra asked, "Do humans always react so quickly in emergencies?" Elias thought for a moment. "I think sometimes. It depends on the person. Some people freeze, some panic, but some just act. You don't think about the rules or the consequences. You just do what needs to be done." Lyra tilted her head, watching him. "It is strange, but valuable. Perhaps that is why the Queen keeps you close." Elias laughed softly, though a little nervously. "I didn't save your life to be honored. I just wanted to help." "Yet you are honored," she said, smiling. "Perhaps because the universe wants you here, not just as a healer or scientist, but as a human who can act in ways we cannot predict." Meanwhile, the palace itself seemed to respond to his presence. The faint glow on his hand pulsed whenever he approached sensitive systems, as if recognizing his human touch. The Queen had noticed this as well, though she did not comment openly. She preferred to watch, allowing events to unfold naturally, knowing that human curiosity and ingenuity often revealed solutions hidden to even the most advanced minds. As days turned into weeks, Elias faced new challenges. One morning, a series of energy fluctuations caused a minor disruption in the palace's lighting and communication systems. Humans might have panicked, but Elias approached the problem calmly, observing the patterns and deducing the source, a resonance conflict between two large crystals embedded in the palace's core. He suggested a subtle realignment, and within hours, harmony returned. The palace vibrated gently, a sound like a deep purr, and the attendants whispered among themselves about the human who understood the palace in ways they could not. The queen summoned him afterward. "You see patterns where we do not," she said. "Your human mind is flexible. It adapts. It connects. These are qualities we value greatly. It is not merely your skill but your perspective that makes you indispensable." Elias felt a strange pride but tempered by humility. He understood that his role was not to dominate or control, but to observe, assist, and connect. The alien world was not a laboratory to be tested upon, but a living system to be understood. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens with Lyra, he noticed a group of young Lumerians experimenting with floating lights. They struggled to synchronize their energy with the devices, and Elias offered guidance, demonstrating a human method of trial, observation, and adjustment. The lights finally danced in harmony, reflecting in the eyes of the children who clapped in delight. Lyra looked at him with quiet admiration. "You are teaching more than science," she said. "You are teaching patience, thoughtfulness, and creativity. These things, they are rare here." Elias smiled. "I think humans have learned that sometimes the simplest solutions come from understanding, not force. Observation, patience, and curiosity, they can solve many problems." The bond between Elias and the princess strengthened over time. They became partners in exploration and learning, discovering new ways to harmonize the palace's systems, understanding alien biology, and sharing knowledge across cultures. The queen continued to watch, silently approving, her presence a reminder that this human was extraordinary not only for what he could do, but for the way he approached life itself. One night, as Elias prepared to rest, he reflected on the events of the past weeks. He had come to Lumeria expecting to observe, to learn, and perhaps to contribute in small ways. Yet he had become part of the royal family's life, trusted with the princess's well-being, and recognized for qualities that transcended science or skill. The mark on his hand, faintly glowing, was more than a symbol of his connection to Lyra. It was a symbol of the bridge he had created between human ingenuity and an alien civilization. He understood now that the universe was not merely a place to explore. It was a place to connect. Each act of kindness, each thoughtful solution, each moment of courage could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. And in this palace, among beings so different from him, Elias Trent felt the quiet power of humanity, the ability to act, to understand, and to touch lives in ways that mattered. As he drifted to sleep, the palace hummed softly around him. Crystals glowed faintly, corridors shifted gently, and the alien forest swayed under the twin moons. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and new opportunities to learn and teach. And Elias, human among the stars, was ready to face them, not as an observer but as a participant in something greater than himself. He had come to Lumeria to study alien life. Instead, he was learning the life of a civilization, and teaching them, in turn, the extraordinary power of humanity. The palace of Lumeria was a city in itself, alive in ways Elias had never imagined. Each day, he discovered new corridors, chambers, and observation decks that revealed wonders beyond human comprehension. Yet, the more he learned about the palace, the more he realized that understanding its systems was only half the challenge. The other half was understanding the people who lived within it, the royal family, the attendants, and the countless advisors whose lives were intertwined with centuries of tradition and expectation. Elias quickly learned that Lumerian society prized precision, harmony, and subtlety above all else. Every action, every gesture, every word carried meaning. A misplaced phrase could insult, and an unobserved glance could convey trust or suspicion. As a human, he had none of these skills naturally. He had to watch, listen, and learn, often relying on intuition where protocol failed. Yet he found that his human qualities, empathy, adaptability, and curiosity, often gave him insight that even the most skilled Lumerians lacked. One morning, he was summoned to a council chamber where the Queen, Princess Lyra, and several high-ranking advisors awaited him. The chamber itself was circular, with walls made of translucent crystal that displayed the flow of energy within the palace. Holographic charts floated above the floor, showing intricate patterns of light that indicated the status of every system in the royal city. "Dr. Trent," the Queen began, her voice calm yet commanding, "we have encountered a situation that requires more than logic. It requires understanding." Elias leaned forward, listening intently. The Queen continued, "Our court has several factions, each with their own interpretations of tradition. Some believe the presence of a human in the palace is unusual and potentially disruptive. Others, like myself, see the value in your perspective. We need your help to navigate this delicate balance." Elias felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had been honored by their trust, yet now he realized that being close to the princess and the Queen came with more than privilege. It came with the duty to maintain harmony in a culture that valued it above all else. The first challenge arose almost immediately. A group of senior advisors approached him privately, expressing concern that his interventions, though successful, might undermine established customs. "Humans act too quickly," one whispered, her skin flickering with subtle shades of orange and green, signaling agitation. "They do not respect our ways. How can we trust that he will not disrupt the balance?" Elias nodded slowly, trying to convey understanding. "I do not intend to disrupt. I act only to help and to learn. If something I do seems unusual, I am willing to adjust, to listen, and to work with your ways." They studied him silently for a moment, as if testing the sincerity of his words. Finally, one advisor stepped back and nodded. "Perhaps your ways have value we have yet to understand, but be cautious. The court watches every action." Elias realized that earning trust in this world required more than intelligence. It required patience, diplomacy, and observation. Every interaction was a test, and he had to navigate it with care. Over the following days, Elias continued his work, assisting the palace in ways both practical and subtle. He helped optimize energy flows within the palace, guided the healers in monitoring the princess's health, and even proposed minor architectural adjustments that improved airflow and light distribution. Each success earned him quiet admiration, yet he remained aware of the lingering skepticism among some factions. Princess Lyra, however, remained a constant ally. She sought him out daily, curious not only about his human knowledge but about the way he approached problems. They spent hours in the gardens, studying plant life, observing the floating lights, and discussing philosophy and science. Their conversations were never idle. Each question led to insight, each answer sparked curiosity. One afternoon, while examining the energy patterns of a floating crystal garden, Elias noticed something unusual. A small section of the palace's energy grid was fluctuating erratically, not because of a mechanical fault, but because of an interference pattern caused by subtle environmental changes. The engineers had overlooked it, assuming the system was functioning normally. "This is interesting," Elias said, pointing to the holographic display. "It's a resonance issue. The crystals here interact differently with the palace's energy fields depending on external conditions, like wind and temperature. We can adjust the field slightly to harmonize the resonance without altering the structure." Lyra watched him, eyes wide. "You see things we do not. How can a human notice patterns in our system so quickly? Elias smiled. Perhaps it's because I'm not trained in your traditions. I look at things differently, and sometimes that helps. The adjustments were implemented, and the energy flowed smoothly once more. The subtle hum of the palace returned to harmony, and even the skeptics in the court could not deny the result. Elias' reputation grew, though he remained humble, careful not to overstep. Yet, as he gained influence, he also faced challenges. One day, an incident arose in which a young Lemurian scholar accidentally caused a minor disruption in the palace's communication network. The scholar feared punishment, but Elias stepped in, calmly explaining the situation to the queen and the advisors. He emphasized the value of learning from mistakes rather than assigning blame. The queen observed silently, then nodded. Doctor Trent, your approach is unusual yet effective. You treat mistakes as opportunities for growth, not failure. This perspective is valuable. Elias realized that his human qualities, empathy, patience, and a willingness to act without arrogance were being recognized as assets. The palace, with all its advanced technology and refined traditions, had room for someone who could combine intellect with humanity. As the weeks passed, Elias became more comfortable in the palace, though he never allowed himself to forget the delicate balance of trust and diplomacy he maintained. He continued to assist Princess Lyra, not just in her education, but in understanding the court. She was intelligent and perceptive but young, and the subtle politics of her people could be overwhelming. One evening, while walking along a balcony that overlooked the glowing forests below, Lyra spoke softly. Dr. Trent, do you ever worry about making mistakes here? About offending someone? Elias considered this. Sometimes, but I've learned that understanding, listening, and acting with good intentions can prevent most problems. You cannot control everything, but you can act with care. Lyra smiled faintly. Humans are strange, but perhaps that is why you are here. You do not follow the rules blindly. You see what is needed. The queen had not been far behind, listening without interrupting. Elias felt her presence, calm yet commanding. Observation and careful action are powerful tools, she said. Your human mind applies them in ways we often forget. That is why we value you. Elias nodded, humbled. He understood that his role was not just to assist, but to model a different approach, a way of thinking that combined intelligence with compassion, observation with action. One day, a new challenge arose. A diplomatic envoy from a neighboring planet arrived, seeking to discuss trade and cultural exchange. The queen asked Elias to assist in translating and interpreting human and alien concepts in ways that would be clear and persuasive. This was delicate work. Misunderstandings could lead to tension, even without intent. Elias studied the envoy's communications carefully. He noticed subtle nuances in tone and phrasing that others overlooked. By carefully rephrasing and explaining ideas, he helped both sides reach understanding without conflict. The meeting ended successfully, earning praise for the queen and quiet admiration for Elias. Later, Lyra approached him. You helped them see clearly, even when words were different. Humans have a way of bridging gaps, don't they? Elias smiled. I think it's about listening, observing, and trying to understand the other side. Not just the words, but the meaning behind them. Lyra nodded thoughtfully. That is wise. Perhaps you are teaching us as much as we teach you. Elias realized she was right. Every interaction, every suggestion, every observation was not only contributing to the palace, but also subtly influencing how the court viewed humans. They were beginning to see that humans, though different, brought unique perspectives and solutions. The glowing mark on his hand, still faintly present, seemed to pulse with subtle energy when he engaged in these interactions. It was as if the palace itself recognized his presence, acknowledging the connection he had made not only with Lyra, but with the larger system. As the days turned into weeks, Elias faced increasing expectations. The court began to rely on his judgment not only in science and health but in diplomacy and problem-solving. Every success deepened trust, but also increased the scrutiny. Skeptics remained, watching for mistakes, yet Elias continued to act with care, humility, and empathy. One night, while observing the twin moons rising above the crystal forests, Elias reflected on his journey. He had come to Lumeria expecting to study alien life. Instead, he had become a participant in a complex society, a trusted advisor, and a friend to the princess. He had learned that human qualities, curiosity, empathy, courage, and the ability to act decisively, could resonate even in worlds far more advanced than Earth. Princess Lyra joined him silently, her eyes reflecting the moons. "Do you ever feel out of place here?" she asked. Elias shook his head. "Sometimes, but I also feel needed. My differences are useful not just to me but to others. Humans have a way of seeing what others do not." Lyra smiled. "Perhaps that is why the Queen keeps you close. You are a reminder of something we cannot forget, that even the smallest acts of care and thought can have a profound impact." The Queen's presence, even in silence, was a reminder of the delicate balance Elias maintained. Yet he felt ready for whatever challenges might come next. His connection to Lyra, the palace, and the court had grown stronger, and he had begun to see the ways in which humans could contribute to civilizations far beyond their own world. Elias Trent, human among the stars, had not only survived his first months in the palace, he had begun to thrive. And in doing so, he discovered that humanity's true power lay not in weapons or technology, but in thoughtfulness, adaptability, and the courage to act when it mattered most. He had become part of a living system far greater than himself, and in that integration, he had found purpose, trust, and the quiet thrill of making a difference in a universe that was vast, mysterious, and waiting to be understood. The morning sky of Lumeria glimmered with a soft, violet glow, filtered through the floating crystal spires that stretched high above the palace. Dr. Elias Trent stood on a balcony, observing the patterns of sunlight that danced across the forests below. He could feel the faint pulse of the mark on his hand, a subtle reminder of the connection he had forged with Princess Lyra. Today, however, the palace was buzzing with anticipation. A diplomatic summit was about to begin, and the Queen had entrusted Elias with responsibilities far beyond his previous experiences. The summit was unlike anything he had encountered. Representatives from neighboring star systems, each with distinct customs, languages, and modes of communication, were arriving to discuss matters of trade, science, and cultural exchange. The Queen had tasked Elias with assisting in communication, mediation, and observation, noting that his human perspective often revealed misunderstandings that others overlooked. Elias entered the grand hall, which had been specially prepared for the summit. Crystalline panels shimmered along the walls, reflecting soft light that seemed to calm the atmosphere. Holographic tables displayed complex patterns of interstellar trade routes, energy flows, and planetary ecosystems. Delegates from multiple civilizations were already present, their skin, shapes, and features a kaleidoscope of diversity. Some were tall and luminous, others small and intricate, with bioluminescent patterns pulsing softly along their limbs. Princess Lyra approached him quietly. "Are you ready, Dr. Trent?" she asked, her violet eyes bright with curiosity. Elias adjusted his jacket and nodded. "I think so. Remember, we just need to observe carefully and help everyone understand each other. That's what humans do best, find common ground." Lyra smiled. "Then let's begin." The summit opened with formal introductions, each delegate presenting their credentials and intentions. The Queen spoke with clarity and calm authority, welcoming all participants and emphasizing the importance of mutual understanding and cooperation. Elias observed carefully, noting subtle shifts in body language, skin patterns, and tone that indicated underlying tensions or misunderstandings. It quickly became clear that one of the visiting species, the Valdari, had a different concept of resource sharing than the others. Their language emphasized ownership, hierarchy, and individual contribution, while the Lemurians emphasized harmony, collaboration, and communal responsibility. Without intervention, this difference could easily lead to conflict. Elias leaned over to Princess Lyra and whispered, "They are not being hostile, but their approach clashes with yours. If left unaddressed, they might misinterpret gestures and words." Lyra nodded. "What do you suggest?" Elias thought carefully. "We frame the discussion in terms of mutual benefit rather than ownership. Show them how cooperation improves outcomes for everyone. Highlight similarities rather than differences." The queen noticed the exchange but allowed it. Elias had already gained her trust, and she understood that his human perspective could provide fresh solutions. When the Valdari representative presented their initial proposal, Elias quietly guided Lyra on how to respond. Instead of rejecting or correcting the proposal, she reframed it, emphasizing shared benefits and opportunities for collaboration. The delegate listened, his bioluminescent patterns softening in response, a sign of growing acceptance. Throughout the day, similar challenges arose. Misunderstandings about energy-sharing protocols, planetary trade agreements, and even dining customs threatened to derail discussions. Each time, Elias intervened subtly, translating human logic into ways that aligned with alien thought patterns. He suggested compromises, phrased ideas in culturally sensitive ways, and encouraged delegates to express their intentions more clearly. At one point, a minor crisis erupted. A mechanical failure in the hall's environmental system caused a sudden drop in temperature, triggering discomfort among several delegates whose bodies were sensitive to cold. Panic could have ensued, but Elias quickly assessed the situation. Using his knowledge of alien bioadaptations, he suggested an adjustment in localized energy fields that stabilized temperatures within minutes. The delegates breathed a collective sigh of relief, impressed by the speed and effectiveness of the solution. Lyra watched him closely. "You are calm even when everything seems to go wrong," she remarked. Elias smiled. "Humans have learned that panicking rarely solves problems. Sometimes the best approach is observation, analysis, and action. That's what I try to do." By evening, the summit had progressed smoothly, thanks in large part to Elias' interventions. Relationships that could have become tense were strengthened, and delegates began to see the value in cooperation. Trade agreements were outlined, cultural exchanges planned, and new scientific collaborations proposed. The Queen formally acknowledged Elias' contributions, praising his ability to mediate without overstepping, to solve problems without dominating, and to build understanding where differences seemed insurmountable. After the formal sessions ended, the Queen requested a private meeting with Elias and Lyra. They entered a serene chamber overlooking the luminescent forests. "Doctor Trent," the Queen began, her voice calm yet filled with gravity, "today you demonstrated not only intelligence and skill, but a quality we value greatly, empathy combined with action. You did not rely on power or authority. You relied on understanding. That is rare, even among our own people." Elias felt a flush of pride, tempered by humility. "I only tried to help, Your Majesty. I did not want anyone to be harmed or misunderstood." "You prevented potential conflict," the Queen continued, "and you did so by being human. Your methods are different yet effective. It seems your species has a talent for bridging gaps where others cannot." Lyra looked at him with quiet admiration. "I saw how you noticed things I might have missed. You see not only words but meaning. You understand intention." Elias nodded. "Sometimes humans have to improvise. We rely on observation, empathy, and careful action. It's not always perfect, but it often works." The Queen's eyes softened. "It works because you act with care. That is why we keep you close. Not as a guest, not as an observer, but as someone integral to the well-being of this court and the princess. Your presence matters. Elia's hand brushed against the faint glowing mark left by Lyra's touch. He realized that this mark was more than a memory of a single act. It was a symbol of trust, connection, and responsibility. It was a reminder that humans, though small in comparison to the vastness of the galaxy, could make a profound difference. Over the next few days, the summit continued, with Elias playing an increasingly active role. He introduced methods of cross-cultural problem-solving that combined logic, empathy, and creative thinking. He encouraged delegates to consider not only their own needs, but the needs of others, framing discussions around shared goals rather than competition. One particularly complex negotiation involved water distribution between two planets with differing climates and resources. Initial talks had stalled, with both sides unwilling to compromise. Elias proposed a model based on simulation and observation, demonstrating how resource sharing could improve conditions for both planets without reducing individual autonomy. He illustrated the solution using holographic projections, showing the benefits clearly and simply. The delegates were impressed. The tension eased, and what had seemed an impossible negotiation turned into a productive discussion. Elia's reputation grew, not through force or authority, but through the quiet power of understanding and clarity. Princess Lyra often observed him during these sessions, taking careful notes. She had learned much from his methods, the importance of listening, the value of patience, and the power of acting decisively without arrogance. She realized that humans brought something unique to the galaxy: perspective, adaptability, and the ability to bridge gaps that seemed insurmountable. At the summit's conclusion, the Queen addressed all delegates in a grand hall. This gathering has proven that understanding, empathy, and cooperation can overcome differences of culture, language, and experience. We are grateful to all who participated, and especially to Dr. Elias Trent, whose presence has reminded us that perspective, no matter how small, can transform outcomes for the greater good. Elias felt a quiet warmth. He had come to Lumeria expecting to observe and assist, yet he had become a vital part of the diplomatic process, valued not only for his knowledge but for his humanity. The glowing mark on his hand pulsed faintly as if in recognition, a subtle reminder of the trust and connection that had allowed him to succeed. That evening, Lyra found him in the palace gardens. "You have done more than anyone expected," she said softly. "Not because you are the strongest or the smartest, but because you act with thought and care." Elias smiled. "I simply try to do what I can. Sometimes humans have advantages because we notice things differently. That's all." Lyra laughed gently. "Perhaps. But today, you reminded us of something we have long forgotten, that understanding and empathy are as powerful as any technology." The Queen joined them silently, her presence commanding yet gentle. Elias felt her quiet approval, a recognition that he had not only succeeded in the summit, but had begun to integrate into the court in ways deeper than he had imagined. As the twin moons rose above the forests, Elias reflected on the past days. He had come to Lumeria to study alien life, yet he had discovered something far more significant. Humans, though small in number and inexperienced compared to civilizations older than Earth, possessed qualities that could influence and enhance even the most advanced societies. Empathy, curiosity, observation, and the courage to act. These were not weaknesses but strengths that could bridge worlds. Elias Trent, human among the stars, had faced his greatest challenge yet. He had navigated complex diplomacy, prevented misunderstandings, and facilitated agreements that benefited countless lives, all without force, without arrogance, and without compromising his principles. He understood now that the power of humanity lay not in dominance or technology, but in connection, understanding, and thoughtful action. The palace hummed around him, alive with energy, life, and possibility. The glowing mark on his hand reminded him that he was part of something larger, a bridge between worlds, a symbol of trust, and a human whose presence mattered in a galaxy of infinite possibilities. And as Elias Trent watched the moons rise, he knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to prove that even a single human could leave a lasting mark on civilizations far beyond Earth. The palace of Lumeria was alive with quiet energy, a living organism of crystal towers, glowing gardens, and corridors that seemed to hum with thought. Dr. Elias Trent walked through the halls, aware of the faint pulse on his hand, the mark from Princess Lyra that had connected them in ways he could never fully explain. Over the weeks, that mark had become more than a symbol of a single act of courage. It was a reminder of responsibility, trust, and the bond he shared with the royal family. Today, the palace was unusually busy. Delegates from distant systems were arriving for consultations, scientists were presenting new research, and the Queen had summoned Elias to a private meeting. He wondered what awaited him, sensing the weight of anticipation in the soft vibrations of the crystal walls. He entered the Queen's chamber to find Princess Lyra already present, her violet eyes bright with curiosity and determination. The Queen herself stood nearby, her silver gaze calm yet commanding. "Dr. Trent," the Queen began, her voice steady, "your contributions to this court and to the well-being of my daughter have been extraordinary. You have proven that your species possesses qualities that can influence civilizations in ways beyond technology or strength. Today we formalize your place within our court." Elias blinked, unsure he fully understood. "Formalize? I don't know what you mean." "You will remain with us as a royal advisor," the Queen continued. "This is unprecedented for a human, but your insight, empathy, and judgment have made you indispensable. You will guide, teach, and advise, not only the princess but the kingdom itself, in matters where your perspective may illuminate paths we cannot see." Elias felt a mix of pride and humility. He had never imagined that a simple act of helping someone in need could lead to such recognition. But he also felt the weight of responsibility. This honor meant that the court, and indeed the galaxy, would look to him for guidance. Princess Lyra stepped closer. "You have already taught me so much, Dr. Trent, not just about science or strategy or diplomacy, but about humanity, courage, and thoughtfulness. You will continue to guide me, won't you?" Elias smiled. "I will do my best, Princess. I will help in any way I can." The Queen's eyes softened. "This is why we keep you close, not to control, not to watch over, but because your presence enriches our world. You remind us of what we sometimes forget, that empathy, understanding, and courage are as powerful as any technology we possess." The days that followed were filled with new responsibilities. Elias assisted Princess Lyra in studying the complexities of governance, helping her navigate the subtle politics of the court, and guiding her in making decisions that balanced tradition with innovation. He introduced methods of observation and analysis that allowed her to anticipate challenges, understand advisors' intentions, and implement solutions that honored both human and Lumerian values. One morning, a delegation from a distant planet arrived with a challenge that could have escalated into tension. They sought access to Lumeria's energy crystals, which were vital to their planetary systems, but the Lumerians had strict regulations to prevent depletion. Initial discussions were tense, as cultural differences made negotiation difficult. Elias observed quietly, noting the subtle shifts in posture, color, and tone that revealed true intentions. He suggested framing the discussion in terms of mutual benefit, emphasizing sustainable energy sharing that respected Lumerian laws while providing value to the visiting delegates. Lyra presented the proposal under his guidance, and the delegates responded positively, recognizing the fairness and clarity of the solution. The queen watched the interaction silently, her eyes reflecting approval. "Dr. Trent," she said later, "you are not merely assisting. You are shaping the future of our diplomacy. You remind us that wisdom is not only in knowledge but in understanding perspective." Elias realized that his presence was no longer an experiment or an act of curiosity. He had become a bridge, a living connection between species, a human who could navigate differences with intelligence, patience, and empathy. Over the weeks, the bond between Elias and Princess Lyra deepened in its unique way. They did not share romance, nor did they need to. Their connection was built on trust, respect, and a shared passion for learning. They spent hours exploring the palace, studying alien flora, analyzing energy patterns, and discussing philosophy. Lyra absorbed his lessons with remarkable speed, and Elias found himself continually inspired by her curiosity and intellect. One afternoon, they discovered an unusual pattern in the palace's energy grids. A series of minor fluctuations were occurring in a seldom used wing of the palace, affecting the floating gardens and light projections. Engineers had overlooked the issue, assuming it was insignificant. Elias studied the data, tracing the flow of energy and resonance patterns. "This is interesting," he said. "These fluctuations are caused by interference between two energy crystals. It's subtle, but it affects the balance of the system. We can correct it without altering the architecture or harming the plants." Lyra watched as he demonstrated the solution. "You see details we overlook," she said. "You remind us to notice the small things that make a difference." Elias smiled. "Sometimes it's easier to see patterns when you are not accustomed to tradition. Being human has its advantages." The correction was applied and harmony returned to the wing. Flowers bloomed brighter, lights shimmered evenly, and the palace's gentle hum resumed its perfect cadence. Engineers and attendants alike praised the efficiency and elegance of the solution, yet Elias felt no pride. His satisfaction came from knowing that he had helped maintain balance, not from recognition. The days flowed into weeks, filled with learning, observation, and subtle problem-solving. One evening, as Elias walked with Lyra through the gardens, she asked, "Do you ever feel that humans are too small to make a difference in the galaxy?" Elias thought for a moment. "Perhaps we are small in size, but our minds can reach far. We notice, we adapt, and we connect. That is how humans make a difference, not by force but by understanding and action." Lyra nodded. "Then that is why you are here. You show us that even the smallest being can influence the largest systems." The queen appeared silently, her presence both gentle and commanding. "Indeed," she said, "Dr. Trent reminds us that intelligence alone is not enough. It is the application of thought, care, and empathy that creates true change. You, human, are teaching lessons that extend beyond your species. That is why we keep you close." Elias felt a warmth that had little to do with pride. It was the quiet recognition that he had become part of something larger, a civilization that valued not only his skills but his humanity. The glowing mark on his hand pulsed faintly, as if affirming the bond he had formed, a symbol of connection, trust, and purpose. As the days continued, Elias assisted Lyra in planning initiatives for education, environmental management, and cultural exchange. He helped her establish programs to teach both Lumerians and visitors from other worlds about cooperation, science, and ethics. His human perspective proved invaluable, often highlighting unintended consequences or overlooked opportunities. One afternoon, a challenge arose that tested all Elias had learned. A minor ecological imbalance had developed in the palace gardens. Certain plants were thriving too rapidly, absorbing more energy than intended and disrupting the delicate harmony of the environment. Engineers had tried traditional solutions, but nothing restored balance. Elias studied the gardens carefully. He noted the interaction between light, energy fields, and plant behavior. Using a combination of observation, careful adjustment, and simple experimentation, he devised a method to harmonize the system. Light frequencies were subtly altered, energy flows realigned, and water distribution adjusted. Slowly, the gardens returned to perfect balance, vibrant yet stable. Lyra watched him, eyes wide with admiration. "You see patterns we cannot. You act without fear and with thoughtfulness. That is remarkable," Elias smiled. "I just observe and try to understand. Nature, like people, has its patterns. Once you notice them, you can help things flow smoothly." The queen approached, her expression serene. "You have transformed this court, Dr. Trent. Not through force, not through authority, but through insight and empathy. Humanity's true power is revealed in acts like yours." Elias realized the truth of her words. He had come to Lumeria as a visitor, a student of alien life. Yet in observing, assisting, and connecting, he had become a teacher, a guide, and a bridge between worlds. The culmination of his work was celebrated during a grand ceremony. Delegates, attendants, and members of the royal family gathered to honor the solutions and contributions Elias had made. The queen formally recognized him as a royal advisor, unprecedented for a human. Speeches praised his insight, his patience, and his humanity. Lyra approached him privately afterward. "Dr. Trent," she said softly, "you have shown me the value of understanding, thoughtfulness, and action. You have not only helped me but all of us. Humans are extraordinary, even if your species does not always see it." Elias felt the familiar warmth in his chest. "I am glad to help, Princess. That is all I ever wanted." The queen's presence was behind them, silent but reassuring. "You have become part of our family, Elias Trent. Your presence reminds us of what is possible when intelligence is guided by empathy and courage. You are human, and that is why you are extraordinary." As night fell, Elias walked through the palace gardens, observing the glowing flora, the harmonious energy flows, and the gentle hum of the palace. The twin moons rose above the forests, casting silvery light across the crystals. He reflected on his journey. A simple act of courage had led to trust, connection, and responsibility. He had become indispensable not through power, but through thoughtfulness, observation, and humanity. The mark on his hand pulsed softly, a symbol of his bond with Lyra, the queen, and the palace itself. He understood now that humans, though small in the galaxy, possessed qualities that could leave lasting impact: courage, empathy, creativity, and the ability to act when it mattered most. Elias Trent, human among the stars, had arrived on Lumeria as an observer. He would remain as a guide, a teacher, and a bridge. And in doing so, he proved that humanity's greatest strength lay not in domination, but in understanding, connection, and the quiet courage to act with care. He smiled as he looked at the moons, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, discoveries, and opportunities to learn and teach. And in the heart of the Crystal Palace, amidst beings of incredible wisdom and beauty, Elias Trent realized something profound. Humans, no matter how small or distant, could leave a mark that resonated across worlds and generations. The palace hummed softly around him, alive with energy, life, and possibility. And for the first time, Elias felt that he truly belonged, not merely as a guest, but as a human whose presence mattered in a galaxy full of wonders. He had bled nothing in harm, yet given everything in care. And the queen kept him close because he embodied the best of humanity, a living testament to the power of thought, empathy, and courage in a universe that needed both. Elias Trent had found his place among the stars.